and companion to Fiona, and Bert, who was one of Bill's workmen. These completed the close family, and there was not one of their lives but had been touched by the big, ungainly, loud-mouthed, but wise Irishman. On that particular day, Katy definitely had needed comfort, for she had been almost ostracised, at least by her stepfather Bill, for being the means of severing a close friendship between him and Rupert Meredith, a relative of Sir Charles Kingdom, the man who had helped to put Bill where he was today in the building world. Katy had been only 13 at the time when, in a mad fit of jealousy after having found Rupert, for whom she had an almost adult love, naked in bed with his girlfriend in her cottage adjacent to the grounds of Bill's house, she had almost brained her with a heavy wooden bowl. It had just missed the young woman's eye. She had also left her mark on Rupert, as he had eventually turned on her by dragging her by her hair and throwing her outside onto the ash path. From that day, Rupert had naturally cut all connection with the house, but as he still worked as manager of a garage Bill had, the two men continued to meet. Bill could not forgive Katy for what she had done. He had valued Rupert's friendship, for it had stemmed from Sir Charles and Lady Kingdom, and had in a way become stronger after Sir Charles had died. But on the day of Davey Love's funeral, among the throng of people outside the church, Rupert had spoken to Fiona for the first time since the event, and because Katy was standing by her side, after some hesitation he had said, "Hello, Katy." Staring back at him, she'd answered simply, "Hello," and at the same time she'd wondered why she'd been so silly all that time ago. What had been this feeling that had driven her almost mad with jealousy? What had it been all about? Next to loving Rupert, she had loved Bill, and so his subsequent ignoring of her had thrown her into deep misery, and she rarely spoke to anyone except in monosyllables. But on that day, when they returned from the funeral, there stood Bill in the hallway of the splendid house of which he was justly proud, and he looked at her, the stepchild he'd loved most of all in his adopted family, and she had looked at him, and when she cried from the depths of her, "Oh, Dad! Oh, Dad, I'm sorry," he swept her into his arms. And as Fiona and the rest of the family looked on, they all knew a great welcoming sense of relief. Life would return to normal. It was after Katy had dashed upstairs, also to end her spate of weeping, that Sammy Love had knocked on her door, and she'd looked at him as if she'd never seen him before. He was 2 years younger than her, yet he'd always seemed much older. He wasn't as tall as her, and he was very thin. Wiry, her dad called him. That was another thing that had made her dislike him and go for him at every possible opportunity, because her dad seemed to love him. In fact, she knew he considered him not only as one of the family, now that he was to live with them, but had always thought him someone very special, even when he cursed and used 4-letter words. Then there was Willie. Willie had stuck to Sammy like a limpet all these years. He couldn't breathe without Sammy. She recalled there had been rows in the house because of Willie's determination to be friends with this boy. What was it about him that made people want to be friends with him? Perhaps it was the same quality that his father had possessed, only in a larger quantity. You couldn't say he was good-looking. She'd never noticed his eyes before, except while they were having a slanging match when they had looked like round black marbles. For a boy, they were large eyes and longish lashes, but his nose was overbig, as was his mouth. He had what she supposed one would call a blunt face, from which his chin seemed at times to stick out. When she had felt his hand in hers, she had experienced a queer sensation. It was as if she were younger than him, he being 14 coming 15, and she only 12 coming 13. On that day she knew that she would miss Mr. Love. She'd been able to talk to him, and she'd discovered he wasn't thick as everybody imagined him to be. He was funny, and said things back to front, and he made you laugh, and you always seemed better for having him near. Yet, as she had looked at his son, she had thought...